Be strong.
Hello guys, welcome to this video. In this video, we'll be seeing how to analyze data from a data set. In this video, we are having a sample data set of ICC men's cricket batting stats. So, to analyze data, first we have to clean the data set to make it more meaningful. And next we have to analyze the data. Now, let's look onto the Excel sheet, which is data set. Now, when it comes to the data set, we have the first attribute here, player. So it has the player name and the country. And the second attribute is span. This has the years when the player has started and ended his career. And next we have the number of matches played, means the total number of matches played here. And next we have total number of innings played in those matches. And next we have the total number of not outs in the career. And next we have the total runs scored in the career. And next we have the highest run scored, and the star here means not out. And next we have the batting average, and next we have the number of centuries scored, and next we have the number of half centuries scored, and next we have the number of ducks scored, and next we have the player profile. Now let's look deeper into this. So we have 3002 rows here, and we are seeing some players don't have any runs or they don't have any 50s. So these are unwanted data to analyze. So we have to change it. So now let's get into the coding part and see how can we clean this data. Now we have a Jupyter file here in which I have coded already. Before data cleaning, we have to do some basic steps. So first we have to import all the basic required modules we need here. So here first we are importing warnings. So this helps to avoid giving us warnings because we are using the keyword ignore here. Next we are importing matplotlib. Next we are importing seaborn. Next we are importing numpy. Next we are importing pandas. So let's run this first. So now importing every model is successful. And next now let's assign df to pd is pandas.read.csv, and we have to paste the path of the data set here, and encoding is there. Next, so here we are using read.csv as our file is a csv file. And a main thing to be noted here is when we paste the path of a file, we used to have backward slash. So when we run it, we have to change it to forward slash. So now let's run this too. So now we have df.shape. Let's df.shape actually gives the number of rows and number of columns in the dataset. So let's run that. So this 3001 is the number of rows and we have 12 columns in our dataset. So now we have df.info. This gives the basic info about the columns and attributes in the dataset. So let's run now. So here we can see the 12 columns we have, and we can see everything is not null and has 3001 elements in it, and we can see the data type of every particular column. Here we can note only the number of matches is in integer and rest everything is in a string format, which is nothing but the object. Now let's go to the next one, which is df.describe. Let's see what df.describe does. So df.describe does give us the total count of elements in the dataset, means the number of rows in the dataset is count, and we have the mean, which is the middle value. We have the standard deviation here. We have the minimum value here. We have the percentile. These 25, 50, and 75 are the percentiles, and next we have the maximum value here. And next we have df dot head. Df dot head actually returns the first 5 rows in a data set. So we have the first 5 rows in our data set. So now let's go to data cleaning. Now we are going to clean our data. So first we are going to separate the name of the player and their country. So for this we are creating a function here which is country. So first we have a df of player, which is nothing but this is nothing but df of player. Now we're going to split it. Means when the interpreter finds the open bracket, it splits there. So it will get splitted here. So now only the Australia is on other side, and David Warner is splitted. Now next we are creating a new attribute, player name. So it says that ARR of 0. Now DA Warner is at the 0th index. So now this is stripped and pasted in that new column player name. Now we have a new variable called ARR1. ARR1 dot split. Again what it does, it splits here. So now Australia is alone splitted. So now next we have a if case here. If percentage, why we are using percentage here, and for some players they even played for the ICC 11. So they have ICC and their country names. So we have to split those steps also. So now if we find forward slash in ARR of 1 of 0, means if we find here we are splitting. So if they find anything here, so now we have found a percentage. So now we are splitting that. So it splits here. So df of country is equal to ARR of 2 dot strip. So now only this SA is pasted there. Else if we don't find any percentage, now just ARR1 of 0 dot strip. Means ARR1 of 0 in the sense just this Australia will be pasted there, and df dot return. So this returns. Now let's run this part of code. And now we are assigning df is equal to df dot apply. What apply does, it creates a new column or does something like that, and we are using the function name. This is a function name country, and we are using axis equal to 1 because we have to change those values in the way of columns and not in rows. If we have to change those values in the way of rows, we have to use axis is equal to 0. So now let's run this part. So now df dot head is just going to give us the data. Ah, now we can see it returns the first 5 values, and now we can see that we have created a new attribute player name, and we have SR, which is Sachin Tendulkar, Sachin Ramesh Tendulkar, SR Tendulkar is there, and the country is India, and for the other players also, it is perfect now. So now let's count the players from every specific countries. So we are using df dot country dot value counts. Value counts is used to count the particular values. So so here we see the number of players for every respective nations here. Now we found something stranger that ICC has to. We have used this function to remove that ICC, but still we are finding that we have 2 players who are for ICC, and 3. This is not a country or not anything. So we have to remove this data. So now let's find which players are playing for ICC, which is a false data. Here we find that 2 players are there, and see here it is wrongly assumed that they are playing for ICC. So now let's change them. So here we have some code to change them. Both players are from England, so we are assigning them that they are from England. So now let's run this. So this part of code actually helps to change this ICC to England. Now let's find who is that player who is playing for the country 3. This is the false data. So Mohammad Nawaz is the player. Here we have country 3. So he is actually a Pakistani player. So we are assigning that he is a Pakistani player in that particular row. So now let's run that. And now df dot, now again we are counting those values to check whether this changes is applied. Now let's run. Yes, now we have found that it is removed the ICC, and that number 3 has removed because we have changed them. uh, so now let's see here. Previously we had ICC and 3 when we use the same command, and after that now we don't find that and it is sorted out. So now we have to drop the player attribute, because the player attribute is useless, because now we have separated the player name and the country. So now let's drop this attribute player. So we have command that df.drop player axis equal to 1. Again, why axis is equal to 1? Because we have to drop the whole column, not the row. We have to drop the column. So axis is equal to 1 and in place is equal to true, because we can call back at any time. We have to use in place. Now let's run this. And now let's just check the first 5 rows whether that a particular attribute has been dropped. Yes, it has been dropped. Now it's starting from the span and we have the player name and the country at the end. So now let's see df dot. So now let's see what are the data types, the particular columns in our data set. So here we find that still only matches is in integer and rest other data sets data is in form of a string, which is nothing but an object. So why this problem is occurring? Now let's go back to the Excel sheet and find out. See, we will find that every player here has some value in integer. But what happens now, if some player has this star, it is considered as an object and not as an integer. Integers allow only numerical value and doesn't allow that special character values. So here we get an error. So it is just showing it as an object. Now let's go down and find why we are doing this. And here we find those hyphen, but still we have integer values. This hyphen is also a special character and doesn't comes in integer. So now let's go back to the uh, Jupyter file. So now it's mandatory to replace this hyphen, and now let's find that which player's innings contains this hyphen. Means now we found that these are those players who has the hyphens in their stats, so it's necessary to remove those. And as I said that even the star also creates us trouble, we should also remove those star. So we are creating a function for those. We are creating a function called not out. In if you find a star in the high score, we have the interpreter has to return 1. If it doesn't find, it returns 0 there. So we are creating a new attribute maximum not out. So df dot apply not out and axis equal to 1. Not out is the function's name and axis equal to 1 because we want to paste these values in the way of columns. And now let's run this part of code. So now we see here that we have new column called maximum not out, and if a player's high score has this star, and we see 1 here, and if doesn't have the star, we see 0 here. So now let's go to the next part of code, and we are assigning the columns here. Means this is the innings, not outs, runs, and because in every of those columns we find this hyphen as we seen in that Excel file. So it's mandatory to remove those steps to make those values to int. So we are using for loop here for column coln columns. Means it goes by every column individually. We are using for loop here. So df of column is equal to df of column dot str dot replace. when the when Python finds this hyphen, it replaces it with 0. Means this hyphen indicates 0. So we are replacing with 0 because we can change the data type into integer. Next we have df of high score. This is the high score. And now we are just replacing this star into nothing, because this is used to remove the star and make those value into integer. So now let's run this part of code, and this is successful. And next, again the same thing is here. And for columns, df dot column is equal to, now we are changing the type because we have successfully removed everything. So we are going to change the type of the data in that particular column. So we are changing the type for every column here as to integer. Okay, so let's even run this part. And next part is only for the average. And first here average is in data type of, now it's in data type of object. So now we are changing into float, because average, you can see here average we have zero point 0.8 zero point 0.6. So we are changing the type into float. So let's run this part of code also. Now we have df.info and df. So let's see what changes has occurred for these blocks of code now. So now here we see that uh, one we have seen that many data types like innings, number, runs, and everything has changed into integer. And we have set the data type as float for average, and we find that it has changed into a float. So this is successful. And now we are having a display of the data set. Now we have all the changes made perfectly here. We have changed everything, and now it's perfectly ready to analyze. Now here comes the data analysis part. Here, firstly, we are going to analyze the data that which country has scored the maximum number of runs in the test cricket. So for that, we are assigning a variable df1, and df1 dot group by country of runs dot sum. This is nothing. This statement is nothing but that it says that the total runs scored is grouped by the countries, and which is the sum of all the runs scored by every players for respective countries. And plot dot figure size, nothing but the uh, length and breadth of the figure size, which is nothing but the graph which you're going to make here. And plot dot title is the heading of the heading of that graph. And plot dot y label is the heading of the y axis, because it's y label. And plot dot x label is the heading of the x-axis. And SNS dot bar plot. Here we are using bar plot because we need a bar graph. And so x is equal to df1 dot index, and y is equal to df1 dot values. Index is nothing but those countries, and y is nothing but the total runs code. And now we are going to represent it. So we are using plot dot show. Now let's run this block of code. So now we got a graph. Now let's zoom out to view in a single screen. Yes. Now we can see this. And now I will explain every stuff here. Uh, Means most runs made by country is the heading. We are using title, plot title. So this is here. And the heading of the y-axis is runs. So here it is, y label. And the heading of the x-axis is country, and we have it here. And x, here we have x is equal to df1 dot index, which is nothing but the countries. We have every name of the countries here. And y is equal to df1 dot values, and we have the values here in the y axis. And mainly this figure size is 10 and 6. 10 is the length, and 6 is the breadth. So we're getting a rectangular graph here. Now let's see what we get via this graph. Here we generally get that England has scored most of the runs. Yes, England has scored most of the runs because they are the founders of cricket. And next we see that Australia. So next Australia has scored more runs. Then we see West Indies has more runs. West Indies established cricket all over the world. And next we see India. So and we see Afghanistan and Ireland has very less runs in the ICC Test batting stats because Afghanistan only got its test recognition at 2019. So now let's go to the next block of code. Zoom. So here we are going to find which country has the maximum number of centuries, means which country has scored the 100 most of the times. So for that we are assigning a variable df2, and here df dot group by country of 100 dot sum. Nothing but now we are grouping those centuries of players by countries of sum. Now we are using plot figure, which is nothing but the 10 is that length and 6 is the breadth, and the title of those of this graph is most centuries made by country. And next we have plot y label, which is the heading of that y axis, and plot x label, which is the heading of the x axis. And we have sns dot plot x is equal to df2 dot index. This is nothing but we have all the name of the countries in x axis, and y is equal to df2 dot values. We have all the values in the y axis. Now we are going to represent, so we're using plot dot show. Now let's run this block of code. Now let's zoom out. Now you can see everything in the same screen. So here we also get the same thing that most number of centuries is scored by England, then followed by Australia, then West Indies, and then India. So now let's go to the next block of code. Here we are going to analyze the number of innings played versus the number of centuries scored. This shows us that how many innings is required to score how many number of centuries. So for this we are using the same stuff. Plot dot figure. Here the figure size is 8, which is the length, and 6 is the breadth. And the name of the x-axis, the heading of the x-axis is number of innings. And here we have plot x ticks, and we have a case here that I for I in range 25, 400, and 25, which means that the maximum number of innings is 400 and the minimum number of innings is 0. And this 25 just says us this step value. It's nothing but this is the start value, this is the stop value, and this is the step value. So after 25 we used to get a value 50, after 50 you used to get 75 in x-axis because this is x ticks. Now let's go to the next one. It's y label. The heading in the y axis is number of centuries, and we have a same step here, y ticks. And for I in range we have 10, 55, and 10. 10 is the start value, 55 is the stop value, and 10 is the step value. So we have after 10 we will have 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on up to 55. Now the main thing is that we are using a scatter plot here, which is different from bar graph. So now uh, x is df dot innings, means the number of innings will be there, and y is df dot hundreds, the number of centuries scored. So we are going to represent here. So we're using plot dot show. Now let's run this block of code here. Now let's zoom out to see this in a single screen. So here we have the number of innings in the x-axis and the number of centuries in the y-axis. So we are seeing multiple players here, and we don't know who is this player, but he has scored more than 50 centuries in less than 400 innings. And now let's go to the next part of code. We'll zoom. So here we are going to analyze the data. Top players who has top average but also have scored more runs than 2000 runs. Here we are just going to see the players who has scored more than 2000 runs, but still they have the top average. So we are taking df1, and we are sorting those values that this actually sorts out the values that the players who have more than 2000 runs. And again df1 is equal to df1 dot sort values by average, ascending is equal to false, and head is equal to 10. What actually this does, it actually sorts the value based on average, but not an ascending order, by descending order. So we have value is equal to ascending is equal to false, and why we are choosing head is equal to 10 here, because we only want the value for 10 batsmen, top 10 batsmen. We only will get the value of top 10 batsmen. So again we have using plot figure size is 14 and 6 here. 14 is the length and 6 is the width. So sns dot bar plot x is equal to df1 dot player name, and y is equal to df1 dot average. So in x axis we are having the player name, and in y axis we are having the average. So x label, which is the heading of the x axis is player name, and the heading of the y label, the heading of the y axis is average. Now we have to represent, so we are using plot dot show here. So let's run this block of code. So now we are able to see those output, and we all know the Lord of Cricket is Don Bradman. He has around 100 centuries here, and next we see Steve Smith there, and we see other players. So it clearly shows that Don Bradman has the greatest average, and who has scored more than 2000 runs and has a greatest average. Now let's go to the next block of code. Century per innings. Here we are going to check how many centuries are scored by players per innings, means top 10 players. Okay, for that now we are assigning df1 is equal to df of d of matches is greater than. We are taking a basic criteria that every player must be playing more than 30 matches. Next, here we are assigning df1 of 100 per innings is equal to, means 100 per innings is equal to df1 of 100 by df1 of innings, which means that how many centuries is scored per innings, which it means that. Next, df1 of 100 per innings is equal to round. We are just rounding of the value here, so we are using this. Next, df1 is equal to df1 dot sort values by 100 per innings, comma ascending is equal to false and head. Here we are just sorting out these values in descending order, means the values of centuries per innings in descending order for only the top 10 batsmen. Next, we are going to plot it. Plot that figure. The figure size is, the length is 14 and the breadth is 16 here for the graph, and we are using a bar plot here. So we are going to get a bar graph here. X is dear founder player name. So X is going to be player name, and Y is going to be the data of centuries per innings. And here X label and the heading of the x-axis is player name. Here Y label, the heading of the y-axis is century scored per innings. Now we are going to implement here, so we are using plot dot show here. Let's run this. So we are getting a graph here, and we are seeing that Don Bradman has the most probability to score an century per innings. And we have other players here. We even have Virat Kohli here, Steve, and we have Matthew Hayden and everyone here. Next, we go to the next block of code here. Most 50s scored by players. So here we are taking a variable df1, and df1 dot sort values by 50, ascending is equal to false. We want players who have scored most 50, so we are giving ascending is equal to false to sort it into descending order, and we want only for the top 10 batsmen, so we are using 10 inside head here. And we are, when we come to the plotting part, The figure size is 16 and 6, which is nothing but the length is 16 and the breadth is 6. Plot title, which is the title of the graph, which is the most 50 scored by players. And next, sns dot bar plot. And in the x-axis we are going to have the player name, and in the y-axis we are going to have the number of 50s. So x-axis, x label is player name and y label is number of 50s. Now we're going to implement, so we are using plot dot show. Let's run this block of code now. So here we see this is the title, and here we see that Sachin Tendulkar has scored the most number of 50s. Next, Chandrapal comes, and Alan Border comes, and Rahul Dravid. When we have anyone who follows this. So now we come to the last block of code in this data analysis part. Here we are going to analyze the players who have scored most number of ducks in cricket. So here we are taking a variable df1. We are using df1 dot sort values by 0, which is the ducks. Ascending is equal to false because we want the most number of ducks scored in cricket, and we are taking only for 10 batsmen here. So next we are going to plotting part, and we are the size of the figure is 14, length is 14, and the breadth is 6. And sns dot bar plot. In the x-axis we have the player name, and in the y-axis we have the most ducks scored by players. Now in x label we have the player name, which is the title of the x-axis. In y label we have the most number of ducks scored by players. So now we are going to implement it. So we're using plot dot show. Now let's run this block of code. Now we can see that CA Walsh has the most number of ducks. Let's zoom out. He has the most number of ducks in cricket, and we even have Ishan Sharma here, Zahir Khan here, Muttaya Muralidharan, Shane Warne here, and hope this video is informative and useful. Please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.